whether someone's just trying to show off with a luxury elevator, still have the conversation about every layer of disability that someday, if that were happen to you or a family member, you have this, equipment that can allow you to live in your home independently as long as you can.
We're pretty clear up front, and most people know in the area they live how high the water gets or is expected to get, and it's just important to take all that into consideration when planning for it.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. I am your host, Curtis Lawson, and we're going to be talking today about home elevators. And joining me to do that, I have Derek Schuppenhauer and Andrew Fisher, both with Home Elevators of Texas. Hey, guys. Welcome here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I've been wanting to talk about elevators for quite some time now, and it's something that we've been seeing more and more demand for, and we have a lot of customers that ask about it all the time. And I think there's a lot of mystery behind home elevators, and we're here to solve some of that today. So let's get started. Why don't you guys both just tell us a little bit, kind of about what you do for Home Elevators of Texas and what's your background and how you got into it. So, Derek, why don't you go first?
Sure. Been with Home Elevator of Texas 2 years, and graduated Texas State in 2020, and been in construction all my life.
All right. And what's your role with
company? I'm the branch manager for Houston, sales engineer. So I assist with design, a little bit of project management, and a lot of field work mixed with office work, measuring, planning.
Cool. How about you?
So I've been with Home Elevator now for 11 and a half years. First job out of college. I went to Iowa State and did construction engineering, worked for general contractors throughout college, and was always searching for a specialized subcontractor role of some kind. Did not know elevators would be part of that, equation, especially coming from the Midwest. Residential elevators were not something I grew up seeing or understood really, right? But the opportunity kind of presented itself. Our owner, Don Zimmerman, was a Iowa State alumni as well.
Oh, wow.
Had that Iowa State connection. So.
Cool. So tell me about the company and like how long the company has been around and a little history there.
So it's actually a good week to answer that question. May 1st is our fiscal year, and we're actually hitting our 40th year anniversary. Oh, wow. So we're pretty proud of that. Our owner, Don Zimmerman, founded the company in 1985 in San Antonio and Austin, where our headquarters is in San Antonio now. And then we moved to Houston in the 90s, and then we just expanded to Dallas about 5 years ago now. So we're the first one in our industry in Texas to be physically located in all 4 major metros.
Cool. And I assume that you guys are a vendor for all the major elevator lift companies out there?
Yeah, we are. Definitely because of the relationships that, go back 3 to 4 decades now. And North America has a lot of strong elevator manufacturers within the residential and accessibility lift demographic of the elevator world. And so we are in a fortunate position where we get to kind of choose what manufacturers we prefer, which ones specialize in the nuance and unique things that a customer wants. Our sales team gets a lot of good options from very good manufacturers. So
cool. So, Derek, I think the question that most people have about elevators is just price. That's the first question that we always get is, what does it cost to do a home elevator? And I think it's something that's not just for the rich people anymore. I think maybe back in the day it was really seen as kind of like a very premium luxury item, but really cost-wise, it's gotten to where it's within reach for a lot of people building a custom home, right?
It is. Out of the gate, a good range to plan on is that most home elevators are going to cost between like $30,000 to $40,000 pre-tax.
Yep.
And it's definitely accessible to a much wider range of people. So there's a lot of different products we can do that aren't necessarily just luxury. And we're finding a lot of folks are doing it to stay in their home and for medical necessity. Those things are important. So the manufacturers we represent, you're going to see the full range of price points.
Yeah.
So
Yes, I mean 30 or 40 grand on a price tag of even a $800,000, but a $1, $2, $3 million home. 30 or 40 grand is really a pretty small budget line item.
That's exactly right.
For most of those clients, right?
Right.
And just if somebody really wanted to go hog wild on a residential elevator, what's like the most expensive situation that you've seen?
They can get up to the 150,000 and up range for a single unit. Yeah, I mean, there's some pretty magnificent homes that they're simply just trying to show off a little bit more than maybe what the neighbor had, and those are fun, right? Those are the ones that definitely take a lot of engineering, a little bit of stress, from sales, project management to installers. But we really take pride in doing those types of units. But it does have a very big range from accessibility to luxury. And that, to your point, Curtis, is what has evolved in just my 11 years, is that this isn't just the rich people's game anymore, right? Which I would say when I got into the business in 2014, 9 out of 10 of our residential contracts were new build custom homes. And that's dramatically shifting to remodels, both, high-end remodels and what Derek was alluding to, just trying to stay in this house so we don't have to move because our main bedroom is upstairs.
Yeah.
And that, with the housing market currently, what it is, a lot of folks are not interested in leaving a house that they love, jumping into that market because their main bedroom's upstairs, right?
Yeah, or something that they're paying a 2% interest on,
Right.
2 or 3% interest on.
Exactly.
They don't want to build a new house for 6 or 7% interest.
Exactly.
These days.
So that's dramatically shifted since the pandemic, honestly. And it's fun to actually see the accessibility side of our business too. I mean, the luxury home elevators, you see some just exquisite homes, 20,000 to 30,000 square feet. And it's just fun to see projects like that, right? But when you actually get to help someone stay in their home, it definitely has another layer of fulfillment where this business isn't just aimed towards the luxury side anymore. Derek had a customer here in Houston. They've lived in River Oaks for almost 50 years, like 47 years.
Right.
And they simply could not get up the stairs anymore. And their stairs had some unique turns in them, and built in the early 1900s, the home originally. Even the stair chair was going to get up to like the $20,000 range because it had to be custom bent around this. And so now with this newer through the floor elevator that's out there, a simple cut through the floor and a little bit of sheetrock and finished floor touch up, we got to put an elevator in their house and let them stay in that house as long as they want to. So
Wow.
that's fun to, see that side of it, which wasn't there as much as it is today.
Yeah. So people who have immediate needs, right? That's a big thing. Like people who either they've aged and they just don't have the ability anymore, or sometimes like a kind of a sudden onset medical condition, an injury,
Right.
A disease, something like that that's causing them to lose mobility. That's something they're going to need that done,
Immediately.
as soon as possible,
Right.
right? But there's definitely a lot of value, and I always tell people to think about what you might need if you're going to be in this house for a long time. People always say this is going to be my forever home.
Right.
Okay, well if it's going to be your forever home, plan for it to be that way, right? Because and we'll get into this in a minute, but the kind of the upfront planning required, the design work to do a future elevator is really not that much on the architectural side if you just go ahead and plan for it, right?
Exactly right.
So just put the infrastructure in place so that it's ready for you when you're ready to pull the trigger on it.
Right. That's exactly right. And I think in Houston specifically, where you have densely populated metro, where there's a lot of townhome construction, right, where they're trying to build up, not out, and stack as many units as they can. They go 3 or 4 levels up. And so what we're trying to do right now is really connect with architects, to your point, Curtis, that an elevator ready home isn't always elevator ready. And if they do just a few items in the design phase and then the construction phase, they already have framers on site. They already have electricians on site.
Yeah.
So if they just prep for it accordingly and stack closets above each other, the clients that move into that home and then have that abrupt surgery or that life, situation happen where accessibility to 1, 2, 3, or 4 levels, now an elevator is what they're paying for, not a construction of a hoistway for an elevator.
Mm-hmm.
And that part of it is what we're really trying to do with architects, is help them plan and design, for no cost. Just put this into your plans, build stack closets, and then
talk to your engineer, make sure
Exactly.
structurally it's good to go.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't add a lot of cost at the beginning. So
No, it's literally like almost no more cost. Again,
Right.
you plan and stack your closets, maybe go and run some electrical for it. I think that's one thing I've seen before where they got closets stacked up, but there's no thought of how you're going to get some power there to it, and the breaker box is on the other side of the house,
Yes.
and you got I-beams for
Right.
for your so you can't just pull a wire between the trusses really
Right.
easy. So there's a little more planning that goes into it than just having the stack configuration, but
there is the pit depression at the bottom is one that can get missed, along with the power, and then one of the walls we need to attach to. So again, you're just looking at it like just a few details at the very beginning of that construction project can save that customer tens of thousands of dollars of construction work.
Yeah.
So
and of course that stuff can always be changed later, but it's always cheaper to do it.
Always cheaper at the beginning.
Always cheaper when the house is being, if the slab is being poured and the house is being framed. Cheaper to do it earlier. What is Derek? Is a pit still required for all elevators, or are there some models where you don't have to have the pit?
I mean, we do have pitless models available, and manufacturers are well aware of the need for pitless, but by and large, especially in new construction, people should plan to have a pit. And that depth is typically about 6-inch minimum, 8 to 12-inch preferred.
Mm-hmm.
And it does change on some of the equipment on the elevator. For example, like the automatic doors will typically require more than a 6-inch depression.
Mm.
But it's a good idea for homeowners to just plan in general to pour some type of pit, or at least check with a few manufacturers they're looking at to see what they specify as the pit. There's a couple that are a little less shallow, but the majority are going to be like a 6-inch minimum.
Okay, and again, that's almost a zero cost item when you're pouring the slab. I mean, your foundation guy might charge you a little bit to box that out, but it's a couple $100,
Right.
not thousands of dollars. But man, if you got to go break concrete later and do a pit after the fact, we actually had a job a few years ago where it was a older family member is moving in with the couple, and the only available bedroom was on the second floor, so they had to get an elevator in, and so we had to saw cut the concrete, put the pit in, but it was a post-tension slab,
Right.
so you got these cables running through everywhere, and so we had to get with the engineer and say, hey, we have to cut this cable. Let's work together and figure out how to reroute these post-tension cables so that we can cut this pit in, and that was a chore. Cutting the cables, getting the cables reattached, getting the pit, repouring the concrete at the bottom. I mean, it added at least $10,000 to that elevator cost, just jacking around with the foundation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of subs that won't even touch that. Once they hear PT cables like that, Curtis, it's like, find something else, right?
Yeah.
And so, to your point, that amount of work can make someone be deterred from even wanting the elevator at this point, right? And so, we understand you're going to have homes that have been built for 50 plus years, and those are different situations. But in new construction right now, why not prepare for this? Even if I have no interest in an elevator, I'm in my 20s or 30s, but there's virtually no added cost if it's just planned right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
But even just for resale value, I mean, certain neighborhoods, certain price points of homes, it's kind of expected to at least have the preparation there in place.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just for resale value, if you can say, "Hey, this home is elevator ready," that can be a big deal if you got to sell the home one day. But also, like culturally, like certain cultures have more family members living with them, aging
Definitely.
parents living with them.
Definitely that.
But it's also just becoming more common across all cultures, with the cost of living, the cost of housing. I mean, we're seeing more and more parents moving in with children in those situations.
Definitely.
So even if you're 30 years old and you're building a house and you're like, I don't need an elevator,
Right.
but think about, hey, well, your parents are in their 60s. What's going to happen with them in a few years?
Right.
And should you be planning for that issue, right?
Right.
What are some other, aside from aging in place and mobility issues, what are some other situations where somebody, might, need an elevator where it's almost required? You got any thoughts on that, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot, especially in the coastal areas. So Crystal Beach, Galveston, even Corpus Christi, Rockport, and Port Aransas. People want these beach homes, but they've got to be raised up, significantly off the ground. So that primary level is sometimes 10 plus feet off the ground. And so people are looking for that lifestyle out there, which is pretty leisurely. And so getting things up like groceries and luggage becomes a challenge.
Older guests,
everything. And so it's becoming very important to plan for those houses to have an elevator. Some others are, like we discussed, the building in the densely populated Houston areas, it's just going straight up. And so when you're talking about people wanting to access the third and fourth floor, no one wants to climb up that high. So very important.
If you found value in this episode of Your Project Shepherd podcast, please consider leaving us a review and sharing it with your friends. That helps us expand our reach and bring this content to more people. Thanks for being here. We just finished a house in the museum district here in Houston that was four levels, and our clients, shockingly, were both like 80 years old, and they're building a 4-story house. And so for them, from the very beginning, elevator was a key part of the discussion. And they definitely put in kind of the Cadillac, steel and glass tube, high end, and of course, as you know, those things, the wider, the bigger you get them, the more expensive they start to get. And this was capable of having somebody in a wheelchair with somebody in there with them going up in a glass tube. So it's a pretty big circle. And that was a pretty pricey elevator. But again, when you're 80 years old, I mean, that's a requirement. That's not even a nice to have. You got to have that.
Yeah, we had a customer in Dallas that was buying a very high-end home, but you made a comment about the different cultures and moving family members. There was a grandparent that was moving in with them, and part of the decision of buying and renovating this house was, can an elevator work in these existing conditions? So it is a very real day-to-day application for us to help people solve. And that is, where's your price point? What's the need? Sometimes the wheelchair size puts you out of that price point, or the physical constraints of existing conditions where you start getting into a structural beam that just makes it unattainable at that point. Okay, so now let's see what other lifts and elevators that we have where maybe we can't fit a full wheelchair in there, but we can get a seat or a walker, and then you have a wheelchair that stays upstairs and stays downstairs.
Kind of a transfer.
Exactly. Yeah. So you really get into the weeds with every customer and how to make this, unique for them, right? So that by the end of it, you don't want to find a place that's maybe the cheapest place in your existing house to put the lift or the elevator, but by the time they get upstairs, they have to hike 30, 40 feet to get to their main bedroom and bathroom. So you have to think about it like through their lens, right? Like, what are they going to actually use this for day to day?
Yeah.
So
we're actually going to do a whole other episode on planning for aging in place, but there's other considerations besides just how you need to get the elevator up there. As you mentioned, it's how far away is it, but also are all the door frames between where you're coming up and where you're going, are all those door frames wide enough to fit through?
Right.
On especially older homes, you get a lot of 24 or 30-inch doors, and then you get the door stop on there. It's shrinking it down another inch sometimes, and you can't fit a chair or a walker through some of those doors. So it's not just how are you going to get there, but once you're up there, how are you getting from point A to point B? The
total destination is what you got to keep in mind the whole time. That's exactly right.
Also here in Houston, we deal with the floodplain, and so we have a lot of elevated houses in the floodplain by necessity. So like we've built several where we had to go, let's say 4 feet to clear the floodplain, but then the clients were like, okay, since we're already going 4, let's just go ahead and go 8 so we can park a car underneath it or have some covered space under the house. And then at that point, we're like, okay, well, we're going 8 feet and we have guests and older family members. We should do an elevator, right? And so this part of town that we are physically in right now has a lot of that issue going on, where you've got these 5 to 10 foot elevated homes where it's almost a requirement too. So what kind of planning has to take place for either that type of situation where you're in the floodplain, where that might get wet at some point, like that pit might get full of water, or as you mentioned, Derek, like coastal homes, where that thing's probably going to get a hurricane, you're going to have waves washing under it at some point. What kind of special planning has to take place to prep for that?
Yeah, I mean, starting at the lower level, right, the pit is a big concern because it's a depression, essentially like a pool that can collect water if there's a way for water to get in. So we recommend things like a sump pump or a drain pit, and then we pair that with our elevator equipment like a float switch, so that will help send the elevator up in case of water or prevent the elevator from being called during.
So it's sensing water in the pit, and it's going to make sure it doesn't come down.
As long as the doors are shut and the safety sensors are, all given the green light.
Yep. And another thing that's big for us is, especially on the coastal homes, we can set the home for the elevator. So we'll home during the install to an upper level, so that when the elevator's not in use after a preset time, it'll go up to its home level, kind of keep it up off the ground level.
Are there any special material? So like for saltwater considerations, right? So for a coastal home, are there any different models that are made for kind of like saltwater exposure that have like maybe more stainless steel parts and less things that'll corrode?
Yeah, so that's where you start getting into kind of a conversation about, is it an exterior rated unit, number one? So when you have like what's called a lift, where it's like actual vertical wheelchair lift, that needs to be signed off by the manufacturer that this has been, tested all the parts and components alike for outdoor cases. Now the coast in Texas is going to throw everything at it, right, compared to other parts of the United States. So we have to kind of make peace with the between humidity, the salt, and just the wind that you can get out here, that you got to do everything you can leading into that. But there are certain products that just need to be dried in that are only interior, and some that are exterior. And then you're really looking at which components do we want to make sure never get wet. That's the most expensive. So like, for example, the brain of the elevator is this controller box. We're always going to put that up high as we possibly can, right? In Galveston, that needs to be 9 feet minimum for their floodplain. Because like what Derek was saying, you leave this home, if it's your second home especially, this is a vacation weekend home, you're not going there that weekend, here comes the storm, you don't have to remember, did I leave the elevator downstairs, right? It's the elevator already ran itself upstairs. And if a flood does happen, there's a couple pieces of steel that are getting wet, right? No electrical components are getting wet, the elevator cap's not getting wet, you're going to be most likely scot-free. So
are any of those components going to have to be replaced because they get damaged by water in a flood?
It can happen. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on that situation. There's, wheelchair lifts that we're only traveling 4 or 5 feet. And if a flood in Houston, you can get over that mark, depending on what part of the city you're in, pretty fast.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some replacements that have to happen. So we're doing everything we can on the front side to make sure we've done what we can control with the manufacturer options and with our planning of like where the electrical goes. Some products you get more, freedom to make those choices than others. But our wheelchair lifts, for example, you can actually put the motor in the tower mast up higher instead of at the bottom. So you pay more for that. So we'll talk to some of the customers and just say, for this part of Houston, I think it's worth the money because, 2-3 feet of water, it's going to hit the base model and wipe out that motor, right? And now it's complete replacement.
Yeah.
Versus you go up to like 7, 8, 9 feet, and now you're probably going to be okay. So,
I mean, it's about setting expectations, like Andrew said. I mean, we're going to be real. People in Houston see almost every year firsthand what it's like when storms hit. So, oftentimes there's just no other choice but to put it in and just hope insurance covers part of it. But we we're pretty clear up front, and most people know in the area they live how high the water gets or is expected to get, and it's just important to take all that into consideration when planning for it.
Yep. So shifting gears a little bit, what are the different types of elevators that are available for home use? And what I mean is like the operational types, like, I mean, the ones that we've installed have been like the glass tube, the pneumatic elevators. I've seen some that are like a cable chain drive, but I know in the commercial world, there's all sorts of operational styles. What are the general, options for residential?
I mean, there's kind of two main categories, and maybe Andrew could think of a third, but as far as interior residential, you've kind of got your traditional enclosed shaftway or hoistway, where like solid walls are built, enclosing the unit, the moving car inside, versus some of the newer styles, which are what you talked about with the glass and steel tube, like a shaftless or a through the floor. So the shaftless and through the floor don't require as much construction prep work because the elevator factory provides the enclosure for it. And but the more traditional, enclosed style that we saw for many years and still see and still do, a little bit more construction work, but it's all kind of enclosed, tucked away, and usually like a corner. Mm-hmm. So big difference between those two. And now on shaftless, there's a lot of different styles. Squares, rectangles, circles, many different shapes, versus the traditional shaftway elevators, usually square or rectangular.
Are most of them now like a cable-driven system where there's a winding at the top?
Right. So the drive system within those products that Derek's describing, the most common one right now, Curtis, is electric gear drive. So you have like a 2 horsepower motor at the top with roller chains that go through a drive box and a counterweight system. And the reason that's becoming the most popular right now is because it doesn't require a machine room space or the hydraulic, and then some drum systems, depending on your manufacturer, require that to be up in an attic. Well, there's a lot of modern homes right now, right? Flat roofs, no attics.
Yeah.
So that drum isn't a great option. Drum at the bottom is going to require like a small compact closet, but again, you're giving up what's valuable space to most people's square footage. So a machine roomless elevator now is by far people's first choice, because you're not losing any speed, you're not losing any capacity, and you're not giving up that room. So the gear drive is definitely becoming the most popular one out there. And then you'll still have hydraulic systems, right, where people that do have space underneath their stairs do have a little closet. They can tuck away this hydraulic pump, and the hydraulic has some advantages in general. I mean, it's definitely an upgraded unit, but the drum is still out there. It's becoming a little bit more obsolete and less popular. Those are the main 3 that have been around forever, but the gear drive is the one that's really spiked here.
Is one any like smoother in operation than the other?
I mean, they're gonna, and most people will say that the hydraulic, it's considered an upgrade, especially price wise. It's a little bit quieter and a little bit smoother. It's hard to quantify exactly how much smoother or quieter. Every home's a little different, but in general, most people that are new to the elevator world are going to be just fine with an electric. The premium hydraulic system is for those folks that want to just go the extra level and kind of max out their upgrades, or it's important if someone has had a hydraulic elevator in their home before. Right. Then they might notice a difference. But by and large, most new folks, side by side, it's going to be pretty similar.
The last pneumatic one that I did, that thing like shuddered a lot. Like it first of all, it felt really slow, and then it felt like it kind of shuddered as it came to the levels. And I don't know if that was a problem with the elevator, but I've heard that that style is sometimes not as smooth as some of the pneumatic.
There's nuance, between not just the manufacturers but those drive systems, right? Which we really try to get into the weeds with those customers before they decide on one and pull the trigger. With the pneumatics specifically, when it's installed properly and that vacuum machine is in a great location, it shouldn't have the vibrations that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But like anything, with the application that you're in, the way it was installed, if those details in our business are not followed through, you're going to have problems with elevators, right? And then that leads to, potentially entrapments, people getting stuck, and that can be a very, overwhelming thing. So you definitely want to explain all of this in detail up front with your customer. And in addition to what Derek was saying just about the operation and the ride, is manual lowering of a unit. You want to know how to manually lower every elevator car that you're in. And for like a hydraulic, that's very simple. You go up to a hydraulic pump and you turn a knob, lets the pressure out.
Yeah.
For the gear drive and the winding drum, you usually have to kind of get up towards the top, maybe in the attic, and maybe get on a step stool, depending how tall that elevator is. So these are things you really want clients to think about when they're making their decision. And even though the hydraulic might jump that price $5,000 to $10,000, do you actually imagine, a family member getting up in the attic, getting on their stomach, and then pulling a lever? Like, you know what I mean? While someone's screaming downstairs that I'm stuck in the elevator.
Yeah.
So you really try to picture that and make sure it's encapsulated enough that like they have all the information, because you don't know what questions to ask for a product you've never had before, right? It is literally our responsibility to make people picture all those scenarios, good and bad.
Yeah.
Before they decide on what product.
That's a great segue into my next set of questions, which is about safety, right?
Yeah.
I think, some people are like, I would never get on a home elevator. It doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't feel safe. But how safe are residential elevators? Do people get stuck? And then, what do they do if they get stuck?
Yeah. So entrapments can happen. You've got, a lot of working parts, and it can be a combination of a manufacturer part default or the application, something that triggered a safety sensor. A really common one, there's some elevators that have what's called a light curtain, which acts like a garage door sensor would. And if some debris gets on that sensor, it thinks there's an object there and it'll stop the elevator. So there's sometimes the safety sensors accidentally get, flipped and it'll stop between floors. So there can be a litany of different reasons why it stops. So that's why it's really important at the time you transition from like the home builder finishing the project to the clients moving in, they actually understand, what the air codes mean, how to get out, is the phone working? A lot of folks don't want landline phones anymore. So we're trying to find new technologies to get a phone system that at least makes that elevator phone work, because every elevator is going to be fabricated with a phone. So
that's required in most cities, right? Is that you have a landline still for that reason, right?
So it's a code, but within Texas, there's not mandatory inspections for an elevator for private residents. Houston is one of the few that has that requirement, and Houston's the only one that has an independent elevator permitting department. So City of Houston treats residential elevators similar to a commercial elevator in a sense. You have to get it reviewed with the shop drawings, and then have a third-party inspector, go through his checklist. And honestly, even though a lot of people, don't want to go through maybe that extra layer of steps to pass a permit and inspection, it absolutely makes a difference for not cutting corners, right? And we know that we have seen other elevators out there that we maintenance and service that feels like that shouldn't have been done that way. So,
and Houston's pretty picky on their inspections too. I mean, we've had inspections fail for something being off like a quarter of an inch on a threshold or something like that before. So they're super picky on that, right?
Notorious, they are. Now, all of our elevators that we install, Houston or otherwise, any of the cities, they're all going to be to code.
That's right.
And we do offer a third-party inspection. So homeowners can choose, if they're not in a inspected jurisdiction, they can choose to have it as an additional cost, but have a third-party inspector come review it.
Yeah. So the issues that I've had haven't necessarily been with the installer, but you're also relying on a lot of times your carpentry team who's putting that door on, who's aligning, floor thresholds, all that kind of stuff. Usually that's where we've seen issues is the guy doing the finished carpentry. He's not up on elevator code, so he doesn't know what has to be aligned a certain way and that the door has to not have a gap and all that kind of stuff, right? So I assume part of what you guys are doing are also educating the builders,
Definitely,
and educating the carpentry teams on what they need to be doing so that you pass your inspections, because they can affect you, right?
Yes. And we don't want to just send the builder a set of shop drawings and say, build this box, right? If we get time with you on that job site and we have to show you examples of photos, talk to your framer directly, knowing that everything that you just said is going to come into fruition at some point, because these homes, especially a custom home in Texas right now, is taking about 18 months to 20 months. So that first meeting you have after the foundation's been poured and the framers get started, there are subs that are not on that job site that will be later that do affect our elevator, right? Mm-hmm. And if you choose a car gate that's transparent, you're going to see the backside of that sheetrock as you go up and down. That might get forgotten about. So now they're trying to paint around an elevator that is finished. So there's a lot of detail there that, is on us to give to the builder and be there to talk to those other subcontractors directly, because not that other subs don't deal with that kind of transition and working with each other, but it will lead to potential entrapments. It will lead into an elevator not working when it should have. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to narrow down what all of those possibilities can be, right? From the installation and manufacturer side, that's on us. And then making sure that when finish outs happen, there isn't a piece of flooring or a door that can trip a safety sensor when it shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And then at the last phase, now we're just teaching the end users, right? That you can't leave this gate open and expect the elevator to run, right? So there's a little bit of just like a muscle memory that we have to teach them, that shut the door, shut the gate. If this code flashes, that's something simple. You can fix that yourself. If this code flashes, you have to call us. This one's easy. We can talk over the phone. So there's kind of 3 layers to like preventing entrapments in elevators from stopping. But the manual lowering, Curtis, is probably the biggest one, that just teaching clients how to do that, knowing that circumstance is going to be pretty intense and overwhelming, right? If their spouse is yelling out there that they're stuck, and it's intense. You're going to find out if you have any sort of claustrophobic inside of you or not, right? But if you are trained ahead of time, it can be a very simple process, and we design this so that you don't have to call 911, because when the fire department gets there, they're breaking doors down. They're not worrying about saving you money, Curtis. They're worrying about getting you and your family out, right? So it's important to get that level of intimacy, and it's kind of hard right now because we work with builders directly so much. By the time we finish our elevator, some of these homes might be another 4, 5, 6 months before the clients move in, or it's a second or third home for them.
Right.
So like actually getting...
You don't get that training face-to-face with them.
That's tough.
I think builders need to treat you guys. It's almost like you're not just a sub who's there one time doing a task, leaving it, and not coming back. Like you're someone who needs to be a part of the process really early on during design, framing. Like multiple checkpoints during the job before you ever even actually install anything, because you're not installing anything mostly until the very end, right? Correct. But yet you need to be a part of the process the whole time.
That's exactly right. That's perfectly worded, because there's just too many details that are not on those shop drawings, right? Those shop drawings aren't going to speak to us. So that's where having a conversation and having, I love it when builders have like 4 or 5 questions they ask us back, because they're engaged, they're actually into the details, and we can show photos of previous examples. And there's just such a night and day difference from the builders that we, contract with, and we meet with their framers, but they can't make it. And there's always just 1 or 2 things that they didn't catch, right? And there's just too much to see on a set of shop drawings that there really does take, a level of intimacy so everyone's on the same page. Yeah. So
You mentioned the finish out on seeing the backside of the drywall and the shaft. I don't know how many elevators I've been on where probably no one ever thought about what that's going to look like as you're going up between floors, and you're seeing exposed wood, you're seeing unfinished drywall, you're seeing all this stuff, and you're like, man, these guys did not plan this out very well. So yeah, it's that goes back even to the design and kind of the selection of the product too. It's like, do you want that clear plastic door that you're going to see through, or do you want that to be solid, or that's part of kind of the design decisions too?
And in fairness to the builder, they might not be at that color selection meeting. You can get started under a contract and not know that level of detail on like color selections, where there's a lot of elevator gates that are not transparent. And if this builder has only had 4 or 5 in the past and none of them had transparent gates, it's on us, right, to tell them like, hey, this one you're going to see a lot, and get with the clients about what they want to look at, right? And then even when they're making those color selections, Derek is having those conversations with the customer, looking at like a scissor style gate versus accordion style gate versus sliding panels. Number one, do you want to see movement so you maybe feel less claustrophobic? But some clients maybe just don't want to see maybe how dirty that wall is, right? Like, so you get a wide range of preference, and we just give you the information and then let you make the best decision for you.
So kind of staying on safety, what happens like when your power goes out? Like, let's say you're in the middle between floors and the power goes out in the home. Is there any kind of temporary battery backup that'll get you to a floor, or does it just stop? How does that roll?
Yeah, good question. Very common question. And the answer is all of our elevators that we sell will have a battery backup on it. So most of them will kick in automatically and will be enough to get you down and out. So they're not necessarily, the battery backups, not necessarily enough to like keep running it, 2-3 times or the rest of the day, but enough to get you down, get you out, and keep you safe when that happens, because it does happen. Now, one thing that we'd love to hear is that a lot of folks are doing the backup generators, whole home generators, and those can absolutely work in conjunction with the elevator and are a great solution when you're in a city like this, especially where power outages are a concern.
What are the electrical requirements typically? Like how many amps is that? Is it a 120, 240? What is it?
Yeah, most are going to be a 220 plus a 120. Some of them are only requiring a 120. But in general, most traditional shaftway residential elevators are going to be like a 220, 230 on a 30 or 20 amp, and then a 120, usually a 15 amp for your lighting supply.
Okay.
That will really vary, Curtis, when you get into the selection process of the type of elevator you want. So like the constant pressure hold to run lifts and elevators, they are not going very fast, right? They're legal by code to not have walls around them because they have safety sensors above and below, but they also go relatively slow. So if you're only, going 12 to 15 feet per minute, you can do that on a 110 dedicated circuit. But when you get to the maximum 40 feet per minute, which is the code maximum for residential automatic elevators, you're going to have a 230 volt and 20 amp typically.
Okay. So that's the consideration, again, when you're planning for something in the future, is that you have capacity in your panel to add that in the future without having to bring in a whole separate sub panel, which jacks your cost up.
Exactly.
Or if you want to back it up on your generator, you're planning for that capacity on your generator as well.
Right.
So a lot of planning that goes into it that people don't always think about.
Right.
I had a couple other one other little question that I've made a note on, and I think this is like everybody's fear because I've seen it in a movie, right? It's like the elevator plummets down, like Freefall, death drop, right?
Yeah.
That's probably not like a realistic situation, is it? Or aren't there some safety mechanisms that would stop that from happening?
Yeah, there is. That should not ever happen in today's world. I have seen some kind of do-it-yourself elevators over the years where people just kind of made something and we walk away and say, good luck. But every manufacturer in today's world, regardless of lift or elevator, automatic constant pressure, there's safety brakes, there's a lot of codes that require these manufacturers, regardless of jurisdiction needing inspections or not. Like Derek said earlier, we are installing every elevator and lift like it's being inspected. So that fear is not something that should ever happen outside the movies, you know. So if it does, you know, God help you. And I'm not sure who installed it, but yeah, not something that's very realistic anymore. So
that's good. Makes me feel better.
Yeah.
So you touched on appearance a second ago. We talked about the door types. There's a lot of different appearance and finish options out there these days. They don't have to look like a commercial elevator. They could be really nicely finished out, like luxurious, right? So I know that we've done some where it kind of gets ordered from the factory as kind of really unfinished almost, and then we have our carpenters go in and finish out the walls with paneling and all kinds of stuff, just like they're part of their hallway or their kitchen or whatever. It's the same look and feel as the house, right? So I assume that there's obviously that option where I, as the builder, finish it out, but then I assume that we can also order them from the manufacturers with a variety of finish styles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most folks that we install new elevators for do want it to match the house and want their trim carpenters and painters to trim it up, finish it out. But each elevator manufacturer, you know, they will offer different interior upgrades or finish out options from the factory. It's very different, and there's a lot of different levels to it. So there's things as simple as like metal fixture upgrades or changing the wood species. But we've got a few manufacturers who offer like complete finish out packages. A couple of them, such as like Symmetry Elevator, offer their Asterisk package, which is just like a turnkey, ultra modern finish out. And so once installed, there's nothing required from the contractors or carpenters, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And some people prefer it. It's just really up to the designer and the homeowner trying to see which direction they want to go. Mm-hmm. Some folks do want it as a blank canvas. Others prefer just a factory complete product that they don't have to modify.
Yeah. It's like, do you want it to look like a commercial elevator, like you're in an office building or a hotel, or do you want it to look like part of the rest of your home?
Right. And I'll usually start that conversation with customers, Curtis, about, are you trying to hide this and blend it in with the rest of the home and make it look like just a regular closet door, and then, oh, actually there's an elevator there? Or do you want to kind of show this off, right? Like start with that simple decision. And what's fun right now is the industry is really starting to change. There's so much growth in this industry that European manufacturers and North American manufacturers are just all starting to add more unique items that make it more fun. Yeah. Because I would say, especially when I first started, what you described earlier was 8 or 9 out of 10 of our elevators was kind of an unfinished wood box that we let your carpenters add trim and paneling to, and your painters do stain or paint. Mm-hmm. And part of that was it's just cheaper because you already have the subs there. And for the factory to slow down and do that kind of customization, it's 3 or 4 times what you would do it for, right? Mm-hmm. And then that stain will never match perfectly like the cabinets down the hallway. Mm-hmm. So that still is a factor. It just gets into that conversation of, what do you want this to feel like? And like what Derek said, the Symmetry Asterisk that just came out this past year has LED ribbons embedded into the cab.
Oh, wow.
So just one little detail, right, that no one else has right now in the industry, that it could just be something the customer says, yeah, I want something unique. So yeah.
As far as the doors go, I mean, again, it can look like just like a closet door. The same, in fact, it's the exact same door everywhere else in the house, albeit with some safety features, right? But then I've had customers that have requested, I want the
automatic sliding door.
The term is, the little sectional sliding doors, right. Just like a commercial elevator. They want that kind of that sleek commercial look. Mm-hmm. Does having that add a lot of cost versus just the regular wooden swing door?
They sure do. I mean, to be totally honest, they're one of the costliest upgrades you can do, but functionally one of the best, especially for medical necessity folks. But they are very different than the typical interior swing doors in that they're fully automatic. Mm-hmm. So there's no manual operation involved. And that's very attractive for a lot of people.
So if there's somebody that's in a wheelchair, they're not having to open one door, pull aside either a curtain or a accordion style thing. You just push a button and go in, right?
That's exactly right. No, that was a good answer, Derek, because it gets back into that functional for accessibility purpose or just aesthetically preference. And the automatic sliding doors can start off as just like a cosmetic discussion. Mm-hmm. But if you do have someone that's already in a wheelchair, and what we try to start that conversation with Grace is that most people get an elevator that are not yet in a wheelchair or in that situation where they're still walking or in a walker. But if you're going to make this investment into your home, plan for it to be as conducive for a wheelchair as possible, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can afford automatic sliding doors, that is a game changer for a person that is maybe someday living by themselves and they want to have independent access in their home forever. The swing door, turning around, pivoting, right? I mean,
that is multiple movements required to even enter it.
Exactly. It's not as simple as will my wheelchair fit through the entrance, but actually put masking tape on the floor and try to turn your wheelchair within that space and make them feel, is this doable, right? Because like what worse feeling than to have someone spend this kind of money and make this investment in their home, and then they get into a wheelchair situation and the one person in their family actually can't use it the way they wanted to. Like that is what we are trying to avoid at all costs. I'd rather not sell the job, honestly. So
it's really eye-opening as somebody who's, able-bodied and not able to do that, right? Like it's really eye-opening trying to do that. I took a universal design class a few years ago where we talked about planning for this kind of thing, and they said, okay, the entire class is going to be in a wheelchair all day today, and we had to do everything, awesome. Sit in class, go to the bathroom, go eat lunch, everything all day, and it was really eye-opening to try to do just typical tasks that we take for granted, like just trying to open a door and go through a door. So yeah, I can imagine you're trying to get into an elevator, you've got to go up to the door, open it, back up, pull the one aside, close the outer door, close the inner door. It's like 6 steps required before you can even start moving, right? It's
exactly right. And that exercise that you did is, first of all, it's an awesome thing for people to do, just trying to create a more inclusive world through accessibility. Half of our business is actually commercial lifts. And so we are always thinking about it through that lens, whether someone's just trying to show off with a luxury elevator, still have the conversation about every layer of disability that someday, if that were happen to you or a family member, you have this, equipment that can allow you to live in your home independently as long as you can. So it's important to think about that. And then ultimately, if you give the customer that information, then you can start getting to budget discussions, like you said earlier, about like the tube elevator that's wheelchair size jumps the cost up tremendously. But if you don't even have that conversation, when someone makes this investment and then finds out afterwards,
they're like, man, I could have spent $10,000 more and gotten that. Exactly. I would have done it.
Exactly. So that's where it's on us, the elevator company, to give that level of detail and to paint that picture so that customers can ultimately make the best choice for this investment. So
so I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on, and we hit on it just a little bit a while ago, I wanted to talk about retrofitting into existing homes, because most of what we talked about is kind of geared toward new construction. So obviously we can retrofit into older homes. It's more work, right? If they weren't set up for it. What are some of the considerations and limitations? Like if somebody called you and said, hey, I've got a 1970s 2-story home, I want an elevator. What are some of the limitations that are there, and what things should they be considering?
Yeah, I mean, some of those considerations are shared with any remodel project, right? So the existing structure, especially like mechanical components, when we're talking about modifying floor systems, going up through a floor, we have to look at what plumbing, electrical, HVAC is in the walls currently. And so on some of the older homes, like for example, this River Oaks home, we talked about had knob and tube wiring that we found as we got into the construction. So things like that, important to consider, like the age of the structure, what could be behind the walls that we don't know about, and the space within the home. So does it make sense to just put it in the middle of a living room, or should it be tucked away in a closet? Well, does that closet have enough space? It's definitely a balance in old homes, and there's certain sacrifices you have to make to provide accessibility through an elevator. So it's something we look at and try to help the customer understand from like past projects. Okay, we did X, Y, and Z, and here's what we found. So, we base our recommendations off experience. We've seen a lot of homes. We've been in the industry a long time. And we just try to help the customer understand where the best locations are, and then juggle their expectations with, reality.
What's the minimum footprint that you would need for a retrofit situation?
Well, it's different for every product, very different. But in general, for like a shaftway elevator, a good minimum size is around like a 50 by 50. So some manufacturers are able to fabricate the equipment smaller than that size, but in general, we try to recommend to go as large as possible, up to about like a 5 foot by 5 foot interior finish size. And so each project's different. And so we'll take the space available and just try to look at which products can fit there.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Derek's talking about the footprint of the walls that you, the builder, would build, right? The shaftway for a shaftway elevator. And so if it's 4 feet inside wall by 4 feet inside walls, that's a pretty small space. It's pretty much one person or two people that are very good friends that are going to share that elevator, right? Where if you get to that 5 feet by 5 feet perimeter, that is going to be a much more cozy elevator, conducive for a wheelchair. What's important for a customer to know is, are you dealing with the manufacturer that has a customizable platform for no extra cost? Because that is like the builder's best friend, right? Especially in a remodel application. Oops, there's a beam right here, there's piping right here that we don't want to touch. Can we just shift it this way or narrow this down? We started with the plan of 5 feet by 5 feet for the shaftway footprint. It's actually going to end up being 54 inches wide, 59 inches long. Great. We're going to make this big as possible, elevator-wise, to the space that you build. But what's really changing, Curtis, is the remodel. Home construction is just so popular right now since the pandemic. Going back to the conversation about the housing market, we are seeing our industry change because of it. There are European manufacturers that I never would have thought would have been in America, where you literally cut a hole through a floor and this lift that looks like a kind of like a foam box goes up and down, and there's no walls around it. And so there's been a transition over the last 6 or 7 years of meeting the American codes, which are quite a bit more strict than Europe, Asia, South America. And it's really changed the ability for homeowners, going back to our first conversation about this isn't just a luxury rich demographic item anymore, that we can cut a hole through a floor system, just do a little bit of reframing, sheetrock, a 110 outlet, and that can be done sometimes under $10,000 for construction cost. So now this whole project remodel, can be under $40,000, where a shaftway being constructed in your home. Some people get lucky and have a closet that wasn't being used, right? Some people have this atrium space that they can build walls and not have to go through structural, HVAC, mechanical. But for a lot of folks, that discussion quickly turns into like an addition on the outside of your home.
Yeah.
Now you have HOA. Now you have, getting the facade to match.
Yeah. Building lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now you're in 100,000 and up right out of the starting blocks.
Yeah.
So it's really changed our industry quite a bit, where the different styles of constant pressure shaftless through the floor elevators can be much more marketable under a budget that includes a lot more people now. And so that part of it's fun for the business, that we actually get to really help people stay in their homes, because that's usually not a luxury situation, right? That's how do we help this couple finish their lives out in their home, right? Yeah. So that's the goal.
I'm not sure if you have the answer to this. Is there ever any insurance assistance for medical needs? So if somebody's like, hey, I have this accident, I'm now, chair bound. I know some medical products, insurance will contribute to that. Some home improvements even. Does that apply to elevators?
It can. The insurance game is tough. No shock to anyone here,
Yeah.
but the insurance companies are not trying to add this to their repertoire.
Right.
So unfortunately, and sometimes unfairly, we tell them go to your insurance and see what they say, but it's pretty rare.
Okay.
We do work with the VA on occasion. We do ceiling patient lifts that you see in like rooms for kids with special needs or really severely disabled individuals. We do those accessibility ceiling lifts as well. Occasionally those get some assistance, but even that's pretty rare. So what we do encourage people to take advantage of is the state of Texas allows a sales tax exemption if you provide the elevator company a doctor's prescription, which is a simple 1-sentence, 2-sentence note that says this person could use physical assistance to get upstairs, right? And as long as that is a primary member of that household, that's all that matters. You send that to us, and the elevator costs 30 or 40, 50 grand. That just saved you
A couple $1,000.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that at least helps, but unfortunately, it's not as much as we'd like to see from the insurance companies.
Okay.
So,
Well, good to know. That's a shame, but
it is.
yeah,
It definitely is.
not too surprising.
It's about gauging expectations, but not surprising.
Yeah, probably help sell more elevators if
It would
if that was available. So yeah. Well, I think that's about all I had for you guys today. Any last words from you guys about what any takeaways from you about what people should be considering when it comes to adding an elevator?
Yeah, just get us involved early is the biggest thing. We're here to help. We deal with the range of folks from homeowners to remodel contractors, luxury builders, and everybody in between. So it's just important to think about what they're looking for in an elevator and understanding the requirements for it from the beginning, because it's very costly and sometimes impossible to change to get what you want after the fact.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would just add, just do your homework when you meet with your elevator company about the manufacturers they represent and how local that company really is. Because something that we do see quite commonly is someone will come with this very low ball offer that like no one else can touch, but they didn't have any local crews, and then 3, 4, 6, 12 months go by, elevator doesn't work, they get stuck, what happens? And they can't get a hold of that company out of Florida anymore, that national company out of Tennessee anymore. So there are national companies that manufacture in-house and they send traveling crews and salesmen, but they're not brick and mortar local to Texas. And for something that could cause an entrapment, something that could cause, severe injury if certain precautions are not followed, both by the manufacturer and the elevator installer, it can get dangerous fast, right? And so you really want to have a company that feels local to you. A lot of our customers become quite close to our service mechanics, first name basis, because they just make them feel warm and safe about little things they hear, right, that might not have to actually call and bring us out, but just to talk to someone and say, no, that should be okay, send me a video. But that level of intimacy will go pretty far. And so I would just warn people, don't just take the lowest offer out there. This is not an area you want to cut corners on, right? And so thankfully, there are places like Houston that actually do hold better accountability. But as soon as you leave those jurisdictions that require inspections, you see people cutting corners even harder.
Yep.
But even the ones that are in Houston, there are crews that come in and install and then they're gone. That could be troublesome down the road.
Yeah.
So just talk to your companies about that.
At least here, the city has your back, which is actually unusual because usually I wouldn't say the city inspectors have your back, but I would say the elevators are one area that they do because they are pretty on top of things when it comes to elevator code. It's a big safety issue, obviously. So fire safety, elevator safety are one of the two of the categories I think the Houston inspectors are really on very, very good. It's funny. We had a similar conversation a couple weeks ago. We talked about home backup generators, and my guests on that episode talked about, Houston's great. Once you get out into the counties, it's the Wild West as far as installers putting in generators.
Right.
Too close to fences, too close to windows, not safe situations, and there's no one looking over their shoulder.
Right.
So it's also a great plug for, you should have third party inspectors. If you're not, well, I mean, even if you are in the city of Houston, but really anywhere, having another set of eyes checking the work, making sure things are being done correctly and safely, is super important. Definitely,
and that part of that episode with the generators is so valid across the state. The 4 major metros are all pretty unique to themselves, but there is not as much government interaction, which most of us like across the board.
Sure.
But it does get kind of scary when you see things out there that you're like, I can't believe they're constructing something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's actually almost frustrating to witness, and then maybe it doesn't end up with like a dangerous outcome, but a lot of folks have not been around residential elevators most of their life. And so I think encouraging that third-party inspection, regardless of where you live, that does not cost a lot of money. Percentage of your contract is well under 1%. So I think it's well worth it.
Do you guys do repair or service on elevators that you do not install?
We do. It just depends on the manufacturers. There are some manufacturers that we have not sent techs to training for, but we do cover most of them. We send a lot of our mechanics to factory training so that they're certified with that particular supplier. And so we will take service and maintenance calls for customers that we did not do the original installation for.
That's great.
As long as it's a company that we feel we can adequately
exactly,
and we can get parts for, right? But yeah, we take pride in the back end of our business, being after we've installed it, builders shake hands, 1 year's gone by, contractor's not there. Okay, now when something happens, who's taking care of that customer? And our owner, Don Zimmerman, took a lot of pride in actually establishing a dedicated service department in our company, so that it's, a team in the office and a team in the field, physically in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Dallas, that will get to someone's home, right, if something happens. And so I think that kind of information and transparency would be what I would encourage customers to look at with their elevator companies, that just make sure someone's going to back you up, years after, because it makes a difference. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate having you.
Great.
And it's been really informative. I hope our listeners and viewers got some good takeaways from this. I know I did. So, so thanks, guys, and thank all of you for watching and listening to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.